Vivaan. 1 month later. Sitting in Kabir and Nisha's living room a month ago, I knew good things were just beginning. After that night, I threw myself into launching my tour company. Everyone was so incredibly supportive, especially Kabir, who had a scary setback a few weeks ago when an infection took root in his body. 1 minute, he was fine. The next, Nisha called me, frantic because his fever had spiked once again. Fortunately, a night in the hospital and some strong antibiotics took care of the infection, but they set him back a few steps in typical Kabir fashion, though he shifted his energy into helping me with some of the details only an experienced small business owner would think about. His insights were priceless, and each day we came closer to the first tour. Excitement surrounded all of us like an unexpectedly warm day after a series of chilly weeks. Tell me a little more about yourself, I said to the man sitting in front of me. He was the 10th interviewee that day and what felt like the 100th that week. When she could, Meera sat in on the interviews with me, but I suggested she stay home today. Knowing that she was having trouble with the pace of her writing, I saw it in each random phone when she was lost in her thoughts. The older man sat back in his chair and took a deep breath. I used to be a truck driver many moons ago. He started. It was a good job, but there was a lot of pressure to get loads in on time, to make sure that trucks were full but never too full. It wore me down. I wrinkled my nose in sympathy. I can imagine, I said. But I love to drive and I'm very comfortable driving buses. I'm pretty sure I was born with a steering wheel in my hands. I love seeing new places, so when I saw this ad, I thought it was the perfect situation for me. After all, since I retired, I'm driving my beloved wife crazy. I think it's either get a job or get a divorce, he said with a twinkle in his eye. I laughed and knew he would be the perfect addition to the staff members I already hired thanks to the savings Meera had invested. My staff would help organize the next tour so I could focus my energies on taking care of my customers when the first tour was going on. I was amazed at how many people had already signed up for more tours. With Mira's social media connections, I had even been contacted by a small but very successful business that wanted to use Musafir service to take their top staff members on a business retreat of sorts. Every now and then, I think about the investors that turned me down. I thought everything was falling apart, but it wasn't. I realized that our path may change and events may settle in like obstacles, but if we continue to move forward, we will ultimately successful. After the interview was over, I walked him to the door. Turning around to look at the office, I felt myself nod approvingly at how much we had accomplished in such a short time. The hard work had been so worth it to get to this point. Those dark days when I listened to the investor, after investor turned me down, I felt like such a failure. But failure is not the end. It's the beginning of a new chance to make your life even better. We cannot avoid the fate that is ours, but we can choose to walk that path with a positive step. As the pieces came together with Musafir, things didn't always happen smoothly, but those challenges strengthened my resolve to continue. There are wins in our lives every day. They might be big, like getting a new job, or they might be as small as getting out of bed in the morning. When we really want to pull the blankets over our head, no matter the size, these successes should be impressed. Right now, came in small steps, but steps closer to opening the business. We decided that the first tour should be to Rajasthan because it was relatively close, but far enough to be a great adventure for our clients. I couldn't wait to see the look on their faces when visiting the Ranakpur Jain temple, seeing for themselves the 1444 intricate carved columns. We would also be visiting Kubalgarh, also known as India's Great Wall, the Mira Temple and Chittorgarh Fort. I rented a tour bus to take our 28 clients. This would help keep costs low, and I could take the time over the 15-hour trip to Udaipur to clarify the rules and fill our clients in on the people and places would be visiting. After all, even though we were compensating people for opening up their homes to our guests, we wanted to ensure that they had a good experience as well. It would also give me time to brainstorm about their trips. The next one, I hoped, would be even better than this first one because Meera would be with me. For this trip, we had decided that she would stay behind in Pune. That way, She could help Misha with the baby and help Kabir, who was still weak after his most recent infection. Nisha and I both made a list of friends who lived in our near Chittorgarh, Udaipur and other cities along the route, and we were quickly able to convince them to host a tour group while we were in these areas. Those who were unable to accommodate such a large group were more than happy to provide my staff with a list of popular local restaurants and other events that might otherwise not capture the attention of larger tour groups. Soon enough, all was set. I bid goodbye to Nisha and Kabir, who gave me one last surprise. Without my knowledge, Kabir had reached out to one of his former employees to go to my apartment. Meera gave the woman Yamini the spare key that she had for my apartment. When we arrived there, I was delighted to find a beautiful, intimate dinner had been prepared for us. Candles were lit on the table and two places were set for us. I couldn't believe it. I was so touched by our friends' thoughtfulness. I quickly called Kabir before sitting down. "Thank you for this, Kabir," I said as soon as he picked up the phone. It was good to hear him laugh uncontrollably for the first time in a long time. "You are welcome, Vivaan. You and Meera have been so good to us, so we wanted you to have one last quiet evening with Meera before you leave." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "This is perfect." I started before Kabir interrupted me. "Stop talking and go enjoy your evening." I laughed. "Yes, sir," I said in mock seriousness. "Thank you, again," but I never had a chance to finish the sentence because Kabir hung up on me. In the meantime, Meera had opened a cola bottle and poured us two glasses. I took a sip as Yamini served our meal. "There's more on the counter if you want," she said, slipping her jacket on. "I'll leave you two alone but can come back tomorrow to clean up, so you don't have to worry about it." With that, she left. Meera and I dove into the deliciously spiced meal, shoveling in forkfuls between going over last minute questions and concerns about tomorrow's trip. After dinner, we abandoned our empty plates and curled up together on my sofa. Meera pulled her hair out of her ponytail, knowing how much I loved playing with her soft locks. Running my fingers through her hair, we walked about the future, both our future and the future of Musafir. Curious as I was to know if Meera had decided to marry me, we avoided the subject. I didn't want to ruin the night by making her uncomfortable again. Life needs compromise in goals, in love, and in your dreams. But in the end, I knew waiting for Meera to marry me would be so worth it. I leaned over and kissed Meera, gently at first and then with a passion that exploded as she matched my enthusiasm. We kissed in a way that we never had before, and the power of it conjured happiness I had never felt until that very moment. My hands were tangled in her hair as our kisses deepened. I could feel her heart pounding against my chest as we pressed together, running our hands over each other, pulling even closer. Our love was so intense, it amazed me. We journeyed the path to love with another, never alone, and I was certainly thriving in that love on this night. I was awake before the sun rose the next morning, excitement and anticipation surging through my veins. In a few short hours, I would be greeting our guests for a maiden voyage for Musafir. I had checked, double checked, and triple checked all of the details, and I knew I had driven my staff half crazy making sure they did the same. The rational part of me knew there would be mistakes and unforeseen circumstances. Problems were sure to arise, and I wished again that Meera had been able to come with me because she was a fantastic problem solver. However, she was only a phone call away, and the effort that we all went into planning this first tour was going to keep those issues to a minimum. And any issue that arose, I smiled as I looked through all the appropriate documents once more, knowing that those challenges would be solved and would be important to remember for future trips. Yes, Musafir was ready to launch. The sun kissed my face as I climbed out of the cab and strode to our locked office door with determined purpose. There, once more, I went through the necessary paperwork, making sure I had all the contact information for the people who would be hosting our trip. Vivaan, Mira's buoyant voice broke through my thoughts and I looked up from my flies, smiling broadly. "Are you ready for your big day?" "Oh, Mira," I said, grateful to see her beautiful face one more time before I left. I thought we said our goodbyes last night. You were sleeping so peacefully when I left. I didn't want to wake you. I didn't expect to see you here. I won't let you leave without being here to wave to you your bus as it leaves. She laughed, crossing back to the window to peer out of the glass. When will the bus be here? I walked around the office and looked out the window, wrapping my arms around her and resting my chin on the top of her head. Her hair was still damp from her shower, and the flowery scent of her shampoo even stronger than usual. Any minute? I responded. I asked him to come about an hour before we leave so I can give the driver some last minute instruction. I figure we should have a solid half hour to go through the details yet again before the customers start to arrive. I asked them to come about 30 minutes before we leave. I pressed my lips on the top of her head and gave her a loud, exaggerated kiss. I'll miss you, Vivaan. She leaned against me, even harder, squeezing my arms possessively. You know I'll miss you too, I responded. I'll be in touch every night and I'll text you after we leave to let you know how things are going. Perfect, she murmured. Oh, I almost forget. Mira darted out of my arms, spinning around to face me as she pulled something out of her bag. I smiled. A gift? It's nothing much, she said dismissively, but I wanted to give you something to commemorate your first trip. I slid off the ribbon and tore off the wrapping paper. There, in a small box, was a beautiful, heavy navy blue pen. I pried it out of the cushioning and examined it. It's beautiful, I said, touched. On one side of the pen, my name was engraved in steel grey letters. On the other side was our company's name, Musafir. The perfect traveling instrument for my traveler, she said. Thank you so much. I breathed and hugged her once more. It is perfect, I confirmed, leaning down to kiss her soft lips. We were still sharing that amazing kiss when I heard the rumbling of a diesel engine driving by the office slowly. I broke the kiss and grinned down at Mira. I believe our chariot has arrived. I looked up and sure enough, the tour bus was just pulling in. Realizing that I was still holding the pen, I rushed back to my desk, deposited the box on my top of my desk and took out my soft briefcase. I took out the disposable pen that I had already put in the pen holder and slid my gift in its place. I quickly slid my paperwork back into the sachet and zipped it close. It's show time, I said, just as our driver pushed open the door. Dev Sarthi at your service, the small white-haired man said, introducing himself to Mira before giving me a mock salute. The bus is full of diesel and we are ready to go. He laughed a giant, bubbly laugh. We shared a chuckle as I reached out and shook his hand before introducing Mira. This is I broke off. For a fleeting moment, I wished I could introduce her as my fiancée, but not yet. This is my girlfriend, I said. Inwardly, I frowned. That title was so inadequate. This chatter broke any discomfort I felt, and we quickly transitioned into last-minute details. We were just wrapping up when the clients arrived. First, a couple, then a single older woman, and then the rest of the group came in all at once with a jumble of conversation and baggage. It took a little time to sort out the suitcases. Looking at all the similar ones, I was glad one of my staff members had suggested that we purchase reusable luggage tags in bright colors and print the Musafir logo on one side. It would make it easier to identify which bag belongs to whom. It would also give them something to use for future travels. Hopefully, the logo would catch the attention of other travelers who would contact us and join one of our tour groups. I took a quick roll call. As we loaded up on the bus, I had placed my bag on one of the front seats so nobody would sit there, and Karan, my trusted sidekick in Musafir, sat beside me. Phoning, I realized that one person was missing. Does anybody know Sridhar Laghari? I asked the group. Our fellow traveler looked from one to the other, but everyone shook their heads slowly. I stepped on the bus to pull out my sachet once again to locate his phone number. Just then, I heard a car's engine downshifting quickly and a red sports car squealed into the parking lot. I'm guessing this is our elusive guest, Dave said dryly. A tall man jumped out of the car and waved enthusiastically. So sorry, I'm late, he called across the parking lot as it trotted to the back of the car and pulled out his bag. Thanks for waiting. I looked him over with a slightly annoyed eye, trying to size him up. Hopefully he won't make it a habit of being late throughout the trip. Mira caught my eye and smiled broadly. My cue to lighten my own facial expression, he is a paying customer. After all, I put on what Mira called my banker smile. Perhaps not as genuine as it could have been, but it was the best I could muster at the moment. You just made it, I said, trying to keep my annoyance out of my tone. A quick glance to Mira proved I wasn't quite successful. Oh well, it was best that he is aware that we are on a schedule, I thought. Perfect, he said, ignoring the censorious timbre of my voice. Mira had already written out his name tag and handed it me silently. I watched Sridhar sizing her up and for one brief moment was glad she wasn't going on the trip. I didn't care for the way he was looking at her. Your larger bag will have to go into the hold, I said, handing him the tag. He looked worried for a quick second, a look that was gone as quickly as it had appeared on his face. This bag has my laptop though, he said. I can keep that with me, right? I nodded. Absolutely. Very good, he said, climbing to the bus. I started to say goodbye to Mira once more when I noticed that Sridhar had a funny look on his face. Is anything wrong? I asked him. He trotted back down the steps and whispered, I get motion sickness sometimes. I'm not sure the back of the bus would be a good place for me. I felt a wave of pity for the man. After all, he looked so vulnerable for a moment. Okay, I said and climbed back on the bus. I looked at all the empty seats near the front of the bus, but the logical solution was to ask Karan to move back. Luckily, he was happy to accommodate my request and Sridhar took the now empty seat beside me, moving my sachet to the aisle seat. This might be a long trip, I thought to myself. I hugged Meera goodbye one last time and climbed the bus again. Dave closed the doors behind me and I felt the wash of air conditioning envelop me. I hadn't realized how hot I was and gave me a quick nod in thanks. After a few last minute instructions, I let them know where our first stop would be. There is a restaurant there, I said. We can have a quick bite to eat. But it will be a few hours. You all had breakfast already, right? I saw enough nods to satisfy my concern. Finally, the bus pulled away from the curb and I leaned around my seat companion to wave to Meera. It might have been rude, but the man did take me my seat after all. Fortunately, Sridhar turned out to be a decent traveling companion, chatting happily about his life and reasons for taking this trip. Despite his rocky start, I was starting to enjoy the guy. At our first stop, he was gracious to the other passengers and I could see them softening towards him as well. I sent a quick text to Meera, knowing she was probably concerned about the rocky departure. She responded within a minute and I knew she must have been watching her phone, waiting for me to reach out. The rest of the day went smoothly and I almost felt a sense of euphoria as I sat back, mulling over the amazement that my dream was coming true. My future was unfolding in front of me, spreading her arms to welcome me into this new chapter of my life. We were at a petrol pump, fueling up the bus near the Gujarat-Rajasthan border. It was a quick stop, so I asked people to stay on the bus so we could push through the last few hours before we stopped for the night. We had already eaten our meal and as Dave climbed off the bus, I stood and looked over my guest. Everyone was reclining comfortably in their seats, satiated by a fantastic dinner and happy to have their hard-earned vacation in front of them. Boss, Dave called through the door, we have company. I crouched and looked out the window, taking in the two police officers approaching the bus. I wasn't surprised. My contacts had told me that in this area, the authorities often check vehicles to make sure there were no problems. I wasn't worried. Guards at the Gujarat-Rajasthan border had already checked our bus. Nothing would have changed after we left the border. I pulled my sachet from the floor, set it on the seat and opened it to take out the necessary paperwork. Identifying my company and my passengers, I wasn't sure what they might ask for, but I wasn't concerned. My staff had made sure I had all the paper certification in an event such as this. Pulling out my pen, I took that and the paperwork and climbed down the steps to greet the police officers. They were amicable enough, and I invited them onto the bus to talk to our passengers before they even asked. Standing outside with Dave, I let the officers check everyone's identification and check bags. My first sense that something was wrong was when one of the officers left the bus with my sachet in his hand. Is this yours, sir? he asked in a serious tone. Immediately, I began to get nervous. I knew it was foolish because I had nothing to hide, but the look on his face told me a problem was imminent. My mind was racing. What could he have thought he found? Yes, I said. Is there a... Come with me, he said forcibly. We walked to the police car together, his hand firmly clutching my arm. At first, I was completely numb when he reached into my bag with a gloved hand and pulled out a package. What is that? I asked stupidly. I'd like you to tell me, he said. I shook my head slowly. I have no idea what this is. I said, I've never seen that before. I barked up a sharp laugh, more of a snort, and my stomach turned over as realization came over me in waves of disbelief, terror, and helplessness. Still, there was a feeling of disconnect as I was loaded into the police car and driven to the police station. The feeling that I was watching a bad movie continued as I was booked for drug possession. It made me sick to think of the PR this would garner in this paper. It would be bad, very bad. Who would have done this? I frowned, mentally going over my passenger list. Who would have wanted to hurt me like this? I sat on the hard, concrete bench in the jail, staring at the wire-covered light bulb until my eyes burned. Around me, I heard people yelling, but I didn't hear words. All I could hear was my own voice asking, why? Finally, I was allowed to call Mira. Tears were streaming down my face when I told her what the police found. Musafir wasn't even 24 hours old, and all my dreams had come to a screeching halt.